Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Gittin daf Samach Vav. Sorry that I can't be in person today. Moving my son out of the Cambridge area, and so I am in his now pretty much empty room. So apologies for the echo as well. So, but here we go. Let's get started. I'll share my screen, and we begin with a new Mishnah at the bottom of Samach Vav, Samach Hey Amabet, and let's just jump right in. So, Barishona, originally, the rabbis said, Hayotze Bekalar, that if somebody is being taken out in chains, and Rashi notes Hayotze Bekalar Lihareg Lamalchut, that he's being killed by the government. So then the Amar Kisvu get Leishti, and he said, and here's the key piece, he only says, write a get for my wife. So he does not mention giving it to her. So, and in fact, let's just continue with Rashi. Rashi's the second to last line of the page. The Amar Kisvu, Afal Pisha Lo Amar Tnu. Even though he did not say Tnu, what do we say? Hare Elu Yichtavu V'Yitnu. So then the Yitnu, those who heard him can go ahead and write the get and give the get to his wife. And so Chazru Lomar, later the rabbis thought about it some more, and they said, you know what, we should expand this rule. It's not enough to just cover somebody who's literally being taken out to be killed, but af hamafarish v'hayotzi b'shayara, that also somebody who goes out and leaves in a caravan, who's one who's separated. Meaning, and Rashi explains, Hamafarish Liyam, who goes out to sea, and Hayotze B'Shayara, and one who goes out with a caravan. And Rashi explains Lamidbarot. So if this sounds a little familiar, it's because we're ticking off effectively all of the, or at least two of the four categories of where one says a Birchas HaGomel after returning, from those types of trips. So the point is that we're talking about a dangerous situation. So as a result, in those, when somebody's about to go into a dangerous situation, if they say that they want to give a get for their wife, they want to write a get for their wife, then we're going to assume that they also want you to give it, because the point of the concern is we don't want them to, we don't want the wife to end up being an aguna, somebody who doesn't know. If the husband sort of disappears on that trip, we won't know what happened, and she won't be able to marry somebody. So as a result, they, assuming that we're not talking about a kohen, we can have the person write a get on the before the trip, and that way give the get, and therefore if anything happens, then she's free to be able to marry somebody else, and if he makes it home, so then they'll get married again. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer, Rabbi Shimon Shazuri says, even somebody who's who's in danger, and Rashi says chola. So that really tees out now sort of all the four situations. We've got somebody in jail, somebody who goes out to the sea, somebody who goes through a desert, and somebody who is sick. So all four of the situations that one would say Birchas HaGomel for, so too one would also be able to say to somebody, write a get for my wife, and we'll say that implies even deliver the get. Okay, so now the Gemara says a story about whether this also applies to gifts, meaning when somebody is about to die or in a very high risk situation, maybe we would say, you know what, we'll allow that person to get divorced more easily and give a gift more easily, just like we're going to allow them to get divorced more. So Ganiva Yotzi Mikol Arhava. Geniva was, in chains, and he was being taken out to be killed. Kihava kanafik lam amar, and when he was about to go, he was saying, when he was being taken out, Havu arba mea zuze l'Rabbi Avina mechamra de nahar panya. Give 400 zuz to Rabbi Avina from the wine that is in Nahar Panya. So Amar Rabbi Zera said, as we turn to Samach Vav Amud Aleph, Dara Rabbi Avina l'silte, he should take a basket on his shoulders, v'azol legabe de Rav Huna Rabbe, and he should go to Rav Huna, his teacher. And because presumably Rav Huna, his teacher, is going to tell him that he's entitled, even though, again, note that it was said, here it says give 400 zuz to Rav Avina, but it does not, but there was no kinyan made. And so in order for a gift to have any effect, you don't just have to say, I want to give you something. I have to actually do some transfer in order to enable that to happen. But here there's no kinyan, but we'll say that even though there was no kinyan, we'll allow it to happen. To Amar of Huna, Gito Kimatan Naso, that a get and a gift have similar rules. Mamatanaso im amad choser. So comparable issue number one is that if you have a monetary gift and the person, that's made when the person is ill and the person gets better, then it gets, it gets unnullified, the gift, because the person gave the gift on the condition that they were going to die and they didn't die. So too, if somebody gives a get in that situation, the get will also be nullified if in fact the person gets better. And the whole purpose of giving the get is just so that the wife doesn't become a widow. And the reason that we would be concerned about that is, let's say the brother of the deceased is not a good person, and the deceased doesn't have any children with his wife, and so as a result, there's going to be an obligation to do yibum. And so that means that the woman will not be able to marry anyone until she has chalitza. And if the brother's not a good guy and is not going to do that, so then she'll end up being an aguna. And so we don't want that to happen. So as a result, maybe the man's going to want her to have a divorce, but it's only a divorce conditioned on him actually dying. Umagito. And so that's rule number one, where we compare a get and a gift. And now we have rule number two, when you compare a get and a gift. But this is the one that's relevant to us and will enable Rabbi Avina to get his gift of 400 zuz worth of wine. So umagito afal gavdelo parish kaven de amar kisvu afal gavdelo amar tenu, that when it comes to a get, even though a man didn't specifically specify that it could be given, and he only said it should be written, and he didn't mention anything about giving it, so we still tell them that it should be given. We're going to say it's a good gift, even though there was no formal kinyan, we'll allow it to happen. So that is the rule, and now we're going to assume that Rabbi Avina is going to be able to win. So Rabbi Abba is going to ask essentially one question, but we're not sure what the question was, and so as a result, the key is that we're going to figure out. We're going to try 2 tries at the question. Those first 2 tries are going to, we're going to see that there's something that clearly doesn't make sense in connection. So as a result, we're going to have a third question, and that is going to be the actual question that he asked. So let's go through. So question number 1, Rabbi Abba. So Maskivla, Rabbi Abba, matana yeshna la'achar misa, afget yeshna la'achar mita. If you are comparing Rav Huna, the fact that a get can be given, a get to a gift, they should not actually be comparable, because a get cannot be given after death, but a present can be given after death. So that should undermine the nature of this, whether it's Xer Shava or connection between get and gift. And so how can we do it? So Hachi the Gemara says, no, you're misunderstanding. Bishlama matana Isa lacharmita. Look, a gift actually could potentially be given after somebody dies, meaning I can ask for something to be given to somebody after I die. But elaget la'achar misa mi'ika, but there is no even feasibility of a get after somebody passes away. So as a result, that it's not, because in one case there's applicability, and in the other case there's no applicability, that doesn't undermine the connection between the two. And the Rishonim tried to understand what was the Havamina and what was the Maskana of this question, but we'll move on to say the bottom line is that that is not a reasonable objection. So Ella Rabbi Abba Hachi Kakashile. This is, we're going to clarify, and this is the question that Rabbi Abba actually asks. Matana Shchivmara, the mixasi. This is a gift of only part of the person's money, right? He obviously said, give 400 zuz from the wine that I have. And so as a result, it wasn't a gift of all of the assets. And we have a principle that matana shchivmara b'mixas, right? And we have a principle that umatana shchivmara b'mixas by a kinyan, that if you only give part, then you have to do a full-fledged kinyan. So what is the implication? Miklal de Rav Huna savar lo by a kinyan? Are you telling me that Rav Huna doesn't require a kinyan in that case? We actually know that he does require a kinyan in this situation. So shiny hacha, the mitzvah machmas misahu, that this is a request when the person is literally being taken out to death, to die. And so as a result, although ordinarily, if one is very ill and one makes a gift, if it's only part of your assets, we're going to say you need to make the kinyan. If the person is being taken out to be killed and is about to die, then we will say, no, even a partial gift does not require a kinyan. Miklal the Rabbi Abba Savar mitzvah machmas misa by a kinyan. Now, if that were in fact the question, that would imply that Rabbi Abba would think that a partial gift, even that's a result of somebody about to die, would require a kinyan. But v'hakaimalan delo by kinyan. But we know that the rule is that he doesn't, that such a person doesn't require a kinyan, and so Rabbi Abba couldn't possibly have meant that. So now we try number 3. El Rabbi Abba hachi kashile. This was his question. Chamra lo ka'amar. The person did not say wine. Demei chamra lo ka'amar. He also didn't say the proceeds from the wine. Rather, me chamra ka'amar. He said from the wine. Now, what does it mean to give 400 zuz from the wine? And so as a result, that is not clear. And so Rabbi Abba is saying is basically we shouldn't have anything that should be required because he made a statement that is not clear. But Rav Huna felt the following. Mechamra, what does mechamra mean? Kidei liyapod et kocho. He says 400 zuz from the wine is intended to increase the strength of Rabbi Avina's claim. And Rashi really does a nice job explaining us how that works. So if we take a look at Rashi, it's about 20 something lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi on Samach Vav Amud Aleph. Kedei liyapo de kocho. It's actually the last Rashi before the Mishnah, and it says, "Lekach lo pirish, that in order to strengthen the hand of Rabbi Avina, that's why he didn't specify lo zu v'lo zu. He didn't specifically say this one or that one. He didn't specifically say money, and he didn't specifically say wine. Liyafo de koko, in order to strengthen the person's hand, the strength. So why? To improve his strength. Shiahe lo kol hayayin shalo achrayas. That this way, all of his wine should be potentially collectible by Rabbi Avina. She'im amar tnu lo yayin, because if Gavina had just said, give Rabbi Avina some 400 zuz of wine, hichmitz min hayayin meya chaviot, if the amount of wine, if 100 barrels of wine had somehow become sour, had become vinegar, hayu hayorshin omrin lo, the heirs of Gavina could have told Rabbi Avina, it was your wine that was the one that spoiled, that became vinegar. And so as a result, based on the principle of Hamotzi Mechabeiro Olav Araya, he would not be able to collect anything. V'i Amar Demei Chamra, and if he said that it was the proceeds of the wine, umachro mimenu k'tas, and some of the wine was sold, v'avdu, and the money was lost, v'avdu hamos, omrim lo, again, the Yorshim would say, the heirs would say, avdu mausecha, your money was lost. Hilkach amar mechamra, this is why Gavina specifically said from wine, demashma yayin vidamav shakol achrayaslo, that all of the money and all of the wine are potentially collectible, and that the point is I want Rabbi Avina, Gavina is saying, to receive 400 zuz and get it no matter what. And so that's why he said that. And shulchu mitam, and so it was sent from there, meaning Eretz Yisrael, mechamra kedei liyapo de koko, that the phrase mechamra is a phrase that could be used in order to strengthen a particular gift. Okay, so now having dealt with one situation where we are, or having dealt in our last Mishnah with a number of situations where somebody is in trouble. So we're going to deal with another situation where somebody's in trouble and wants to give a get. Here we have somebody who's thrown into a pit. Misha hayam mushlach lavor, somebody's thrown into a pit. And the person cannot be seen. For Amar, kola shomeas kolo, and he says, to whoever hears his voice, yichtov get the ishto, harei elu yichtavu v'yitnu. Again, he only references writing, and we say that even it can be written and can be given. And Rashi explains when it says kol shomea kolo, it's Rashi says uperish shmo b'shem yiro. He actually says who he is. He announces who he is, so you know how to identify him. Because after all, you can't see him. That's going to be clear in the Gemara that we're about to do. But even so, we're going to trust that we understand his voice. Now, others understand this Mishnah as being a situation where you recognize the voice. But either way, we're dealing with a situation where you don't see the person, and we're going to enable a get to be given. So the Gemara wonders, shouldn't we worry that maybe this is actually a demon in the pit and not actually a person? So Amar Rabbi Yehuda kisharo lo demus adam. No, you see the you see the person, the image of the person. You see that there's a person down there in the pit. You just can't tell who it is. Well, in hunami idamu ye idmu. But demons can also make themselves look like a human being. So you see not only the form, but you also see that there's some kind of shadow there. Well, in hunami islahu bavua, but demons also can have a shadow. No, they see the shadow of a shadow. So basically, how when you walk, you can see there's not just a shadow to to your shadow, but there's like an edge to the shadow, and so that's like the shadow of the shadow. So that's an indication of sort of more of a 3D form, as opposed to if one were to just create an image of a shadow, so then that image would have sort of presumably sharp edges to it, and so that would be the difference. The Dilma Inunami Islahu. Well, in second, maybe we didn't. Now, the other cases we presume that the demons have it, but here we're asking, maybe demons also have a shadow of a shadow. So Amar Rabbi Chanina, Limdani Yonatan Beni, Yonatan my son taught me, Bavua Islahu, Bavua Devavua Leislahu. Demons have a shadow, but they don't have a shadow of a shadow. The Dilma Tsarahi. Well, 1 second, maybe it's a real person, but maybe it's not the person who the voice says it is. Maybe it's a co-wife, meaning because we are always concerned that co-wives and a number of other people may have it in for the particular wife, and so as a result, they'll try and get her divorced. So Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, the Shas Hasakana. So the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael taught that, listen, notwithstanding the fact that maybe you have a valid concern about a co-wife, and maybe even you have a valid concern about demons, bottom line is that in a time of danger, when the person is actually at risk of not making it, we're going to write and give the get, even if we don't identify the husband, and even if and as Rashi says, She'ein Makirin Im Zehu Shapira Shmo, even though we don't recognize that this is necessarily the person who says what his name is. Okay, so that brings us to the next Mishnah. And so the next Mishnah turns to a healthy person, or maybe not so healthy. So let's see what I mean by that. So Habari, again, a healthy person, Sha'amar Kisvu get Lishti, says, write a get for my wife. So Ratzal Sachik, he's just playing with her. He's teasing her. It's not meant to be so that he should actually that the get should actually be given. However, Masa Bavari Echad Shamar, but there was one healthy person who said, Kisvu Getli Ishti, said, write a get for my wife. But then, and it turns out that it was written and given, Ba'ala LaRosh Hagag V'Nafalumate, and he went up to the top of the roof and he fell and he died. And Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said in this case, Im Atzmo Nafal Harei Get. If in fact he fell on his own, meaning that he committed suicide, that he died by suicide, well then as a result, we're going to say that this is a valid get. But if the wind pushed him, if it was just an accident, well then it's not a valid get. So clearly we may not be talking about a fully healthy person in that situation. But all right, but Ma'aseh, the store, it seems like the case that we actually bring from our Mishnah contradicts the ruling, the first ruling. The first ruling is that it's not a valid get, and then you tell me a story where it could be a valid get. So so there's something missing, and this is what the Mishnah is supposed to say. If the end of the situation tells you about the beginning, well then harei get. Then it is a valid get. Meaning if the end of the situation tells you that in fact the husband is not fully healthy, well then it's a valid get. And we have a story. Because there was a apparently healthy person who said, write a get for my wife, and then he went up to the roof and he died. And if he fell on his own, meaning he committed suicide, then it's a valid get. But if he did not, then it's not. Okay, so now we have a related story. So a certain person went to the shul, Ashkach Makre Yanuka Uvre Diyasve, and he finds a teacher and the teacher's child sitting together. The Yosef Inish Achrina Gabayu, and there's a third person with them. So these three people can't become a Beit Din because we have a father and son among them. But now what happens? And he says to them, Amar Lahu, Trey Minaichu, two of you. So obviously, because you can't have two witnesses who are siblings, who are father and son either. So it means the third person and one of the other two. Nichtavu Gita Lidvisu, go and write a get for my wife. The Sof Shachiv Makre Yanuka, the parent, the father in that story, who is the teacher of children, so he unfortunately dies. So Mishmashvu Inche Bara Shlicha B'Makom Abba Olo. So the question that's being asked is, do people appoint a son to be their agent when the father is present? So if you would say that yes, well, then the son and the third party would be able to write the get. And if you say no, if a father and son are present, then you're always going to only intend the father. Well, now the father has died and you won't be able to have the get be valid. So Rav Nachman Amar lo mashru inshe bara shlicham b'makom abba. Rav Nachman says you don't appoint a son in the presence of the father, and therefore there's no possibility of a get. Rav Papi Amar mashru inshe bara b'shlichem b'makom abba. Rav Papi says no, you can. So there we have those two different positions. Amar Rabba Hilchasa mashru inshe bara shlicha b'makom abba. And Rabba says that the halacha is in fact that we do appoint that a son in the place even when the father is present, and indeed that is in fact a halacha. So in that case, you would be able to still give the get by having the third party and the son work together. Amr, so now that we sort of teed up in this Gemara asking people to give a get, so Amr l'shnayim tenu get l'ishti, if the person says to two people, you should give a get to my wife, and Rashi clarifies, Apagata lo Amar kisvu. They didn't say anything about writing. They just said giving. All right, Apagata lo Amar kisvu vitnu. They didn't say write and give. Hare elu yichtemu ba'atzman. They are supposed to assign the get themselves. Below yomer le'edim acherim, and they shouldn't tell that to anybody else. Lachtomt that they shouldn't tell anybody else to sign. Delav based dimenenhu, they're litzavos al acherim. They are not themselves a court that has been given the authorization to direct others to prepare the get. Ela edim shavinu, they're just witnesses. Ubegamara mefarish al ksav haget im yecholun litzavos l'sofer acher lichtov o heim atzmam tzrichim lichtov. And the Gemara is going to clarify that when the person says to give the get to his wife, and the implication is that they should write the get, is the writing that is being referred to the signing of the get, or is it even the literal writing of the words of the get? So that's the fundamental question of whether or not when you ask two witnesses to prepare a get, to give a get for you, are you telling them to also do the underlying writing, or are they able to ask a sofer to prepare it? So, and not only in that case, but l'shlosha, if you tell to three different people, meaning so it could be a potential beit din, as we say, afal pi shehem re'uyin li'asot beit din, even though they are fit to be a beit din. So back into the Gemara, into the Mishnah, top of Samach Vavam Bet, kisvu get utznu li'ishto li'ishti. If you say to write a get and to give it to my wife, and back into Rashi, right? Kaven de behedja amar lahu kisvu. Since the person told these three people specifically to write, low based in Shavinu. They're not equated to a Beit Din, Ella Adim. They're like just witnesses, and they only have the ability to write it. Hare elu yichtavu v'yitnu. They have to do the writing and they have to do the giving themselves. They can't ask somebody else. But Amar l'shlosha, to new get leishti, if you say to 3, give a get to my wife. So back into Rashi, third line, v'lo amar kisvu, even, and here you did not say to write. So then harei elu yomru la'acherim v'yichtavu. This is now a court because you've told 3 people, 3 men, and so as a result, they actually have the ability to ask somebody else to write the get, and then and to sign the get, and they'll just take care of delivering the get, and they can even have somebody else deliver the get. So based in, because this first person has made them into a court and has empowered them to make the get happen. Divrei Rebbe Meir, that's Rebbe Meir's position. V'zo halacha ha'ela Rebbe Chanina ish ono mi beis hasurin, and this is the law that Rebbe Chanina of Ono said when he returned from prison. And Rashi tells us, Mishmo shel Rabbi Akiva, that this was a first narrow line of Rashi, that this was said in the name of Rabbi Akiva, shenichbash beveis hasurin, who was imprisoned in the jail. So Mekubal and what did he say? Mekubal ani ba'omer shlosha tenu get leishti sheyomer lachirim v'yichtavu mipnei she'asan based in. Again, this exact same rule that we said to begin with, that if you tell 3 people to give a get, they have the authorization to have somebody else write it and prepare it and take care of it. So Amar Rabbi Yossi numinu l'shaliach. That Rabbi Yossi said, and when we say numinu l'shliach, it means amarnu l'shliach l'chanina, that they said back to Chanino of Ono, and then continuing in Rashi, shenasa shliach b'halacha, that he was this agent to tell this halacha, the halacha zu, la'omer b'beis hamidrash, to say in the Beit Midrash, we said to the messenger, af anu mekubalim, we also have a tradition, shafilu amar lebeis in hagadol shebirushalayim tnu get leishti, that even if you tell the greatest court in Yerushalayim that they should give a get to the person's wife, sheyilmadu v'yichtavu v'yitnu, they have to do it themselves. So Rabbi Yossi says he disagrees with the position of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Meir, and says no. Even if you say to a Beis Din that to write it, if you don't explicitly empower them to do something else, then they have to do everything themselves. Amar la asara kisvu utnu get leishti, if you say to 10 people to write a get and give it to my wife, echad kosev ushnayim chotman, you just need 1 to write and 2 can sign. But kolchem ksubo, but if the person says all of you should write it, well then echad kosev, 1 writes the text, the chulan kosman, and all of them have to sign. Lefikach im meis echad mehem, so if one of them were to die from the group, harei get batal, the get is not going to be, but obviously before they actually sign, then the get is not going to be a valid get because not all of them in fact sign. Okay, so that brings us, I'm sorry, so I didn't scroll the screen. So that brings us to the Gemara, which is now going to clarify the question that I mentioned before. When in Rashi, when we say write, does it mean the name at the bottom of the get, or does it mean the actual text of the get? So Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba shalchu le'mibei Rav Shmuel. So the Academy Yeshiva of Rav sent to Shmuel, Yilamdu Rabbeinu, teach us, our teacher. Amar l'shnayim kisvu utnu get liishti. If you say to 2 people to write and give a get, v'amru l'sofer, and they tell a sofer to write the chasmu'ain, and they tell the sofer to write the text of the get, but they actually sign it. Mahu, what's the law? So shalach lahu. So Shmuel sent back. Teitze v'hadavar tzarach talmud. Listen, give me some time. It needs further study. So Maya Dabar Tzarech Talmud. What requires further study? So Ilim Mishum Dahavulahu Mili. If you want to say, well, maybe it requires further study because the husband used only words to these agents, and that. And umisapgale, and Shmuel was uncertain. Mile im misran l'shliach, lo misran l'shliach, lo misran l'shliach. and what Shmuel was unsure about was when we have somebody who gives a job to somebody, and that job does not involve an object, but only a conveyance of words to that person, are they allowed to make somebody else a further agent in that situation? But if that were the case, Amar Shmuel, Amar Rebbe, Halacha Karebi Yossi, the Amar Mili, Lo Misran L'Shliach. You cannot pass along just words to another agent. Meaning, if all you're doing is passing along a command, that doesn't work. But if you pass along an object or a role with respect to the object, so then that can work. But the point is that so this doesn't work. You can't tell somebody to do something and then have that person go and ask somebody else to do it. That is not going to be a type of issue. That's not going to be a valid situation. So that can't be the problem. So it's not about. So it must be something different. Elul Shmuel hakamin b'ayla. This is what Shmuel was wondering. Hai ksovo, ikasav yadan, iksav haget. When the husband said to them to write, did he mean the actual language of the get, or was he specifically saying the signatures that they were going to write on the get? So so let's take a look and see if we can answer it from our Mishnah. Because Amr Lishnayim Tanu get Ishti, if you tell two people to give a get to my wife, Olishlosha, Kasu get Utnu Ishti, or you tell to three people that they should write a get and give it to the wife. So give it to my wife. So Hare Elu Yichtavu V'yitnu, we say that they should write it and give it. Doesn't that show that the instruction to write means to write the text of the get? No, he gufa kami baile. This is precisely the question that Shmuel is asking. Ksovo ksav yadan hu o ksav get who. When you say that they should write it, are you referring to their signatures or to the text of the get itself? Well, pshita de ksav get who. It must be the language of the get. De katani seifa, because Amar Rebbe Yossi numinu l'shaliach that Rabbi Yossi said to the messenger, "Af anu mikubalim." We have a tradition. Shafilu Amar lebeis din hagadol shebrushalayim tnu get leishti sheyomadu v'yichtavu v'yitnula. They are going to have to learn how to write the get. Well, now, if you tell me that we're talking about the language of the get, and then that involves real professional safrut, and so as a result, it's not completely clear that they'll be able to do it. But if you're going to tell me that the writing that we're referring to is the writing of their signatures, is there some judge that doesn't know how to write his own name? So clearly, doesn't this show that the writing has to be the writing of the text of the get? And the answer is yes, in fact, there could be a judge who doesn't know how to write his own name, because we could have a new court and they don't necessarily know how to sign. And so as a result, because they don't know how to sign, Shmuel's question remains a question. All right, now, if you say that writing refers to the signatures, haksav haget kasher, but the text of the get is okay, even if the agents appoint somebody else to write it. Va'amar Shmuel, Amar Rebbe, halacha Rebbe Yossi, de Amar mili lo mimsaran l'shliach. But how can you allow that? Wouldn't that violate the Rebbe Yossi's principle that if you give somebody a command, then they're not allowed to ask somebody else to do it? So Amre, no, because you can say as follows: because if in fact you say that when we say writing, we mean the signatures and not the text itself, get nasa ka'omer imru. It's as if the person specifically told the agents to tell somebody else. And if I tell you to tell somebody else, then that is not going to violate Rabbi Yossi's principle of you can't pass along an agency. So, and umoda Rabbi Yossi, Omer Imru. If I say to you, tell somebody something, well, then that's a situation where Rabbi Yossi would say, yes, you can, in fact, convey that to another agent. Okay, so now that we are, I'm sorry, I didn't scroll again, I apologize. And so now the Gemara is going to challenge whether Rabbi Yossi would really allow agents to provide further instruction to others if they are told, tell others to write a get. But for details of that challenge and for how the challenge will be resolved, please stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and a very good Shabbos.
Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you.